Hi, hello. The movie that I want to talk about today is called Our Little Sister, which is a movie by Koreeda, who is a known Japanese filmmaker who has made other great movies like Shoplifters and Broker. The movie is about three sisters who live in their grandmother's house because their father abandoned them and their mom to go start a new life with another woman. The movie starts at a funeral, the father's funeral, and this is where the three sisters basically meet for the first time their half-sister. And decide to accept her and take care of her. So, yeah, okay. My favorite part of this movie is really the dynamic between the four sisters. I was able to relate to each and every one of the four female characters, which to me is pretty impressive because it does take a lot of craft and time writing-wise to be able to write properly complete and complex female characters, and he wrote four that I could completely relate with. I think another element that I want to mention is the ways in which he used research. So basically he interviewed real life sisters and incorporated a lot of the information that he gained from those interviews into the script to really give those real life details to the dynamic between the sisters. For example, especially around food and around the dinner table. One of the examples is, for example, when one of the older sisters is making plum wine, and she reassures the younger sister that she will make a non-alcoholic version for her that she can consume. Little details like that make a lot of difference, I think. Another thing that I learned that also lent to the dynamic being quite realistic is that they shot the movie over 10 months so that they could have each season in the movie, and essentially during those 10 months the actresses spent quite a bit of time together. They went to movies together, they shared meals together, and that relationship and that connection built naturally over those 10 months. And you can really tell that in the movie, like it really translates on screen. Then on top of that, the director, the cast, also spent a lot of time in what became the grandmother's house. They did some gardening, they spent time in the different rooms. The director and the crew discussed also where the older sister would go, where the little sister would sit. It was a lengthy process, but it does really pay off. For example, in the blocking, that feels completely natural and very, very intentional. Another element to their to the dynamic between the sisters that I really love is that it's based on kindness and care and acceptance. And basically, it was really important to the director to show the ways in which kindness and acceptance can mend and fill the void left by abandonment and grief. And one example of that is, for example, the ways in which the older sister learns to accept her father's mistakes by accepting and caring for the younger sister. And then in return, the ways in which the youngest sister learns to accept herself and to deal with the guilt that she felt towards her older sisters, which, I don't know, I think that's a really, really beautiful thing to portray on screen, personally. I found it visually absolutely stunning also. I am a huge sucker for Japanese aesthetics, and I'm served in droves in this movie, which is why I've also included a couple of stills in this video. And then on top of that, he really imbues each space, in particular the grandmother's house and the different rooms in the house, with such feeling that it just adds another layer to the already existing aesthetic beauty of these spaces. This movie made me feel all sort of warm and cozy inside. I found it to be such a comforting and lovely, soft movie. The relationship between the sisters is a relationship that I 100% want to be a part of. It's also a relationship that I feel very protective of. Like, it makes me feel protective of the movie and the people in it because it's so delicate and precious. And I read a really good review that I will link in the description below of this movie, where the author writes that watching this movie induced an ache in her chest because it made her miss her own sisters. And I 100% relate to that. I have siblings of my own, and it's such a complex and deep relationship. Like, it's a relationship that builds over years, and the layers and layers of love just also build and change and deepen over the years. What I also wanted to address is that his films usually have a social message or a social awareness to them, especially the ones that I mentioned at the beginning, so Shoplifter and Broker. This particular movie, Our Little Sister, I think is a little different in that sense because it doesn't have, in my opinion, such an overt social message about it, but it does have a lot of intention, especially around the theme of acceptance. That was very important to the director. And it's funny because before doing the research and before watching this movie again, I had completely forgotten that the film started around grief. Like, the only thing that I remembered was basically sisters spending time together and enjoying each other's company. And I think the reason for that is that not only did the director and the crew and the actors and actresses like imagine such a soft way of accommodating for grief and grief survival in people's lives, but I think it was also the theme of acceptance is peppered throughout the movie in such a subtle way that it's not like bombarded at you. You still integrate it, but it's done in a very subtle way. What I learned from this film and this filmmaker, Koreeda, is that I would like to include a lot more improv in my future projects, especially in the rehearsals, to be able to really mold the roles around the actors and actresses that I will cast. He mentions that he really rewrote some of the roles to fit the actresses, and I think that's part of why the roles meld so well with the actresses. And I think that's a really, really good lesson, like to use my growing relationship with the actors and actresses and my growing knowledge of them as people to really rewrite and tailor the script. Another thing that this research and this movie taught me is that making a good movie takes time. They spent 10 months shooting this movie. And I think that's a really good reminder for me to keep in mind. Now, obviously, emerging filmmakers like myself don't necessarily have 10 months to spend on a feature-length film just yet, money-wise or time-wise, but I will still try to apply that perspective, but using the means that I have at my disposal. And then, another thing that I really want to try to also push myself on is his attention to detail and the way that really, really, really does impact in a positive way the script. The ways, for example, in which he weaves kindness throughout the movie and throughout the characters in every, like in the dialogues, in the relationships, in the blocking, it really ties together. And then just more generally craft-wise, I think especially in the editing, he gives the viewer time and he gives the story time to unfold. It's not an action movie, it's not a TikTok. You know, he lingers on some of the shots, he lingers on some of the scenes, and I think that's something I really need to keep in mind when it comes to rhythm and the ways that rhythm serves story. And each story has a different rhythm and requires a different tempo. Also, from what I remember, there aren't a lot of like crazy camera movements. You know, there are quite a few static shots. And again, that's something that I appreciate. It reminds me that you don't need super like showy, complex camera movements to make a good story, to make a story with a lot of feeling that connects with an audience. Basically, I want to incorporate a lot of elements from his filmmaking into my own work in the future, if I ever get to make movies again. But in particular, just the intimacy, you know, the level of intimacy between the sisters, the delicate nature of the movie, the softness of the dynamic, in the treatment, in the visuals, in the ways that the sisters interact with each other. Yeah, I just love this movie. Basically, it was really inspiring to me. Yeah, that's it. Have you guys watched this movie? If you have, please let me know in the comments. I would love to talk to other people about this movie. I really liked it. And if you haven't, are you considering watching it? Have you seen other films by Koreeda? You know, let me know. Anyways, thank you for watching and see you in another video.